Antonio. We would love to have you. We do have concerts coming up. Our 30th anniversary will be celebrated on October 30th at Confluence Park right here in San Antonio, and we are totally elated about that. And without further ado, we have a full house of tellers, and I can't tell you how excited we are. And we will continue our stories until we finish them. So don't worry about deadlines. You don't have to watch your watch. John was so gracious enough. He is our Zoom master. He will just continue on with our Zoom until the very end, and it should be a lot of fun. Just a little reminder, while we have our tellers on, we'd like for you to remain muted in the sense of actually muting your own screen, and that will help John out and the tellers so that there won't be any interruptions throughout. We also have a little chat box on the bottom. If you want to click on that, it's always nice to say something after someone told. Just give them a little accolade, something to encourage them, maybe a connection you made to a story or poem or song, whatever is going to be happening. It's always nice to read kind things. So we highly encourage you to be part of that chat box if you'd like. And at the very end, I promise you, we will all unmute, and you're welcome to scream and shout accolades to your tellers that you loved hearing tonight. So, so for right now, let's let the stories begin. Our very first teller is one of my favorite all-time people. I feel like we grew up together, Larry Thompson, in the San Antonio Storytellers. We have grown old together. But he looks awful good for being a Texas cowboy storyteller. And he is a tall tale winner from all over the United States. And he's here with us tonight to share a tale. How about giving Larry a big hand?
Well, thank you, Sue. And as with all these virtual things, y'all make a signal or something that you can hear me. I think I'm off mute, but somebody to give me a thumbs up or something. There we go. There's a few. Mark, you got me a thumbs down. What is that supposed to mean? That's all right. Well, I know some of the folks on this this virtual meeting tonight are experienced storytellers, and so I'm gonna give them a question to ponder as I share this with you. Have you ever learned a story or created a story or crafted a story, told it for a long time, and then suddenly it takes on a completely different meaning? And just ponder that for a few minutes as I tell you this. I was using a story the other day with some elementary kids that I've used for years and years about my great uncle Rusty, who was the ranch manager for a big horse outfit out in West Texas, out beside of Groover, Texas. That's the biggest town around. If you've ever seen that movie Castaway, at the very end when Tom Hanks is lost out there on the highway, the back corner over his shoulder, it is part of that ranch that my great uncle was managing for years and years and years. And it was a horse ranch, and it was the brand they used was 2 zeros, and they called it the double knot. Everybody went to the double knot. After folks started to learn reading and writing, they changed it to the double aught, but that's okay. Now, great Uncle Rusty, he was out on that ranch for years and years and years, and the old man who owned the place finally got a little bit tired of running the ranch, and he decided to sell. Now, up until that point, the double aught, they used a brand on the back end of the horses. It was 2 O's side by side. And it looked kind of like this. There's the back of a horse with the double aught, and that was their brand, and it was super simple. But when the old man sold, he sold to a guy from Fort Worth, a city fellow named Martine. And Mr. Martine, he took over the ranch and immediately started changing things, as people do when they buy something new. You know, we've been in this house a while. We just finished a screened imports back here. You know, you just got to put your stamp on things. And old Mr. Martine read online somewhere that a brand should reflect the person and might even use the initials of their name. And so Mr. Martin decided that he would redo the double aught brand just a bit. And he explained it to my great uncle Rusty, and he said, "No, sir, no, sir, no, sir, that's not going to work. No, sir." Well, Mr. Martin, being in charge, directed Rusty what to do, and well, the brand was struck. And Mr. Martin really didn't understand why my great uncle Rusty was all confused, because all he wanted to do was add an M to the brand. But as soon as they put it on a bunch of horses, you can tell that they suddenly got confused. Confusion reigned, right? So I've been using that story for years and years and years, and the old double aught. And there's a lot of tales that come off the old double aught, but the reason that it changed for me is back in November, my wife and I took on two little foster boys. One of them's named Oliver, and the other one's named Odie. So we could call ourselves around here, instead of the Honeydew Ranch, we could begin to call ourselves a double aught ranch. I'll tell you what, these two boys are, they're a handful. The youngest one, why, he just now turned 9 months old. And the older one, his older brother, well, he's not really older as much as he's just turned 2. Now, I tell you what, some smiles on their faces. We was over at Chuck E. Cheese, you know, that big pizza place, so that boy's second year birthday. I don't expect I've ever seen anybody smile quite so much when that big rat comes crawling out from behind the curtain and embraces everyone. Lord knows, when I see a big giant rat come at me from behind the curtain, I definitely do not want to embrace him. But somehow a little tiny kid loves that big old rat coming out. And these boys, they've changed their lives a great deal. When Odie was we got him about 3 months old, and he couldn't sleep at all. We put him in this little pack and play at the end of the bed. I call it his crate, but that genders the evil eye from my wife. But anyways, we put him in there at the end of the bed. And in the morning time when he woke up, if he could get a grip, he would just peek up like this over the top and look around and see what he could see. And there we were in our bed, just laughing at him. He started crawling a month or two ago, and he's all over the place. You just hear us, and suddenly we'll say, "We got a runner, we got a runner," and he's off somewhere. Oliver, he's the 2-year-old, and I'll tell you what, we put him into like this academy daycare thing. And the first time he brought home some refrigerator artwork, well, that took me back 30 or 40 years to when my kids was little like that. But I guess the thing that really put it over the top for us and turned us into the double aught, one night, we took these two boys out to a local restaurant and had a real nice dinner. And the appetizer we used was a fried cheese stick. Now, personally, I love fried cheese stick. My wife loves fried cheese stick. And old Oliver, probably a year and a half old, might have been the first time he'd ever encountered a good old Texas cheese stick. And things went okay in the beginning. He had it, and he had it in his hand. He kind of felt of it, and he took a big old bite of it. You know, those cheese sticks, they just come all in one piece, and he had the whole thing in his mouth. Directly, he decided maybe he didn't like Texas cheese sticks as much as everybody else, and he began to extract it from his mouth. But I tell you what, that cheese stick had already gone down into his gut, and he started pulling that thing out, looked like a magician with a bunch of silk cloths coming out of his face. It came out, it must have been about 8 feet long, curled up on the end of the table. But this is when you know that the kids are there and they kind of getting attached to you. He picked up that little plate with that big old mound of stretched out cheese stick and headed it right over to me in case I wanted a bite. So I guess I'll say we're checking in tonight from the old double aught ranch out here in Seguin, Texas. And I hope y'all enjoy the rest of the storytellers here for the SASA Night of Stories. Thank y'all.
That was amazing. Double aught preciousness. Oh,
double aught, both of them.
Do let them stop by tonight so we can.
Well, there's always a chance. Keep your eye on the camera. There's always a chance they might pop on. Oliver's a ham for the camera. Odie just kind of looks.
The branding story was hilarious, and I don't think I can see straight right now, especially with the
Well,
cheese stick still coming out of my mouth.
I'll tell you what, that was the funniest thing. Just
Thank
stretching
you.
it out like an old magician.
Thank you so much, Larry. What a great way to begin our storytelling. We'll continue on now with one of my favorite friends of all time, Karen Archer. And I'm so glad Karen is part of our SASA organization. She actually takes care of our YouTube channel, and she is amazing with that and edits just about everything we do there to make it actually look professional so that we can actually pull in more folks to SASA. And Karen is also an amazing techie person, very much involved with Tejas and Tejas Storytelling Festival, and I'm sure the conference. She's amazing, and we're just so fortunate to have her. She actually has a story tonight that she'd like to share, and I love it because it's going to be one of those short tales that we can all tell. You know, it's an anecdotal story, which I think are sometimes the best stories that we should write down and remember forever. And Karen's going to tell one tonight. So how about a big hand for Karen Archer?
Thanks, Sue. You know, summer has begun for us, and some people are traveling. This year feels real special, and it feels exciting and a little scary at the same time. When I think of summer getaways, I think of Mount Rushmore and the Black Hills and Devil's Tower. The Lakota Sioux actually named the Black Hills, and their name for the Black Hills is Paha Sapa. Paha Sapa, Black Hills. The Sioux, you know, were born from the Black Hills. Many years ago, they actually lived under the earth in the center of the Black Hills, in the black and the rock and the dark. A god came along one day and spoke to the leader of the tribe. And this god was a bit of a trickster god. He told the leader that life was very good up above on the surface of the earth. And the leader was invited to go up and try this living on the surface of the earth. And so he did. And it was just as the god told him it was. It was wonderful. It was beautiful. All kinds of gifts were lavished on him when he was visiting the surface of the earth. He went back down below and he talked to a couple of the elders down in the tribe. And he invited them to come up to the surface of the earth and to also see if they had the same experience and if they liked it. Well, they did come to the surface of the earth and visited, and they had the same experience. Beautiful things happened to them, and they were just lavished gifts upon them of food and clothing and shelter. It was wonderful. They went back down and they spoke to the other members of the tribe, and they all got together and had a meeting. And they decided that they would take the god's offer and go to the surface of the earth to live forever. They went up through the wind cave onto the surface of the earth to live. And for a little while, everything was wonderful. But as I mentioned, this is a trickster god. When they were there for a little while and could not go back to their former living, the god took away all of the gifts. Life was very difficult for the Sioux. As they lived on the surface of the earth, they wandered, and it was very chaotic and troublesome for them. Finally, two gods who were good gods, came and helped the Sioux. They took pity on them, and they taught them how to care for themselves on the surface of the earth. And things were very good from there. The Sioux learned how to live with the land and the water, and they learned to live in harmony with the earth. And they still do to this day. We find ourselves in a somewhat situation that is somewhat similar. We are coming through a chaotic and troublesome time. And we are moving forward into a different life. And it feels hopeful, but it also feels uncomfortable at times. We can learn from our elders. We can learn from those who went before us. And we can know that we have all that we need to find our way through. Thank you.
Oh, that did my heart so good, Karen. I love that. Thank you so much. And it's so true. Stories that go back so far can still teach us. Thank you so much. You told it beautifully. Thank you so much, Karen. And I see we have some other tellers that are either here to listen or to tell, but I'd just like to say hi. I think I saw Shiny come aboard, which is fabulous. And let's see, I see there's an Irene here. Thank you for being here, Irene. And Pat Schieffer got in here, and Travis, Jen. These are names I may or may not know, but I certainly am so happy you're here, either as listeners or tellers. I'll be asking you soon, but welcome. I'm so glad you all are here. Well, without further ado, we have our next teller. Let's see. Oh, it's a friend of Elizabeth Beamon's, and I was so excited that Elizabeth asked Anne if she possibly would like to come on board tonight, and boy, am I glad she did. She is a librarian, like so many of us that are here tonight, and she was librarian in public libraries for quite a while, and she would like to share a tale tonight also. So Elizabeth, thank you for inviting Anne, and Anne Coleman, thank you so much for sharing your next story. Let's give Anne a big warm of applause. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue. Well, my story starts, it was a beautiful Sunday morning. It was gorgeous. I was 7 years old that spring, and this Sunday, with it so pretty, somebody decided that we would walk the few short blocks to church. And so as we were walking, my two older siblings started out, and I followed, skipping along, followed by my parents with our two younger sisters. And oh, as I was going, I saw beautiful buttercups just kind of waving in the breeze. And oh, there was redbud trees. I love them. They're beautiful. They have nothing but flowers, no green at all first. And the tulips, oh, many colors, including pink, my very favorite. And somewhere, I don't know from where, but I could smell lilac. Well, we were soon at church, and I scurried off to Sunday school, and then we all gathered, my family gathered, the second pew from the front. That's where we always sat. And there we were and Mrs. Jackson started leading the singing, and we had just started the second verse when she stopped and pointed and said, "Edith isn't breathing." And I looked up, and then I heard my daddy said, "I'll go get the car." Well, I don't know, but exactly what happened, but people picked her up and carried her just next door to the parsonage. And there I stood right by the couch where they had laid her. Somebody said, "Step back." And so I did. And when I stepped back, I remembered my mommy had hay fever. It was so bad that we could never, ever, ever have flowers in the house. And our Christmas tree, it was a shiny aluminum one. Well, people were standing around, and there was the pastor. He was down on his knees and looking over the arm of the couch right into my mommy's face. And he was talking to her, and she kept nodding. And I just stood there watching her chest. It wasn't moving at all. Pretty soon he reached into his pocket and pulled out this little bottle of oil he always carried. And then he put some oil on her forehead. And he said, "Shall we pray?" And he laid his hand on her head. And he started to pray. It was the longest prayer I ever heard. I was just watching her chest. And finally he said, "Amen." And when he did, her chest lifted and lifted and lifted. Her lungs were filled with God's breath. Oh, that breath changed my life. With that breath, we could all pick dandelions and put them in fruit juice glasses on the table. Oh, and the windows could be open. Our first Christmas tree, it was real. It was green. Oh, with that breath, things changed. And with that breath, when I was 13, my parents had another little girl. Oh, baby Janny. And with that breath in high school, my mother sewed costumes so I could step out on stage in the high school plays. And with that breath, she attended my high school graduation. And we both stepped from the car at the same time when my parents drove me to college. With that breath, I saw my mom hold each of my newborns. With that breath, she gave me her wise counsel and wonderful advice. With that breath, when there was the flu epidemic, she worked night after night after night after night with taking care of the patients. And with that breath, from that day to this, my mother has never, ever had hay fever or the flu or even a cold. You see, with that breath, God gave my mother back to me.
That was lovely. Oh, Anne, I've got goosebumps with that breath. Yeah, I think you've changed our lives too. Thank you for such a touching tale. You were 13 years old. Oh, and so many more years with her, I'm sure. That's unbelievable. Thank you so much. Okay, Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you get to follow your great friend, and thank goodness it's you, because you will do a fantastic job. Let me tell you all about Elizabeth if you don't already know. She is lovely inside and out. She says yes anytime people ask her to do a slight favor, which turns out to be a pretty large workshop at a festival. She tells stories when asked. She is amazing. Just loved getting to know her all these years. And as far away as both of you are from us, at least we can share these stories just through Zoom. So with that said, how about a big hand for Elizabeth Beamon?
Thank you. I'm so excited. When I saw Sue in Hawaii, I saw a picture that she took, and I said, "Oh, I have a story about that kind of flower." And she said, tell me, or rather, let me tell it on Wednesday night. And I said, "It's too short." And my son, who's watching from Virginia, it's a story about him, but Travis, I'll tell you about that later. And my daughter, who's watching from Ontario, Canada, just want to give a shout out to her as well. How wonderful. My story begins in the 1800s. In 1898, my great-grandmother, Fanny Matilda Henderson, graduated from high school. And I am wearing her high school senior ring tonight. And 3 years later, she had my grandmother, Eleanor Winters Beck. It was September 11th, 1901. I always think about the 2001, what happened on September 11th. And so when I saw that happen in 2001, I was so sad, as we all were, but I was so grateful that some good things happen every day on things that bad days happen too. And so my grandmother, 100 years before, had been born September 11th, 1901. Now, she was born in a family of privilege. And so they gave her a silver spoon. So I have it, and it has engraving on it, her name, which this is not very big, right, for engraving. But when people came to visit her, she lived in Oakland. She was born in Oakland, California, which is on the West Coast. And she could see from certain vantage points as she grew, she could see over the bay, San Francisco, and the Golden Gate Bridge. Well, when people would come to visit her, they had to bring a card and put it on a tray, and mom and the people that worked for them would bring the tray to the mommy, Fanny, to say that someone has come to see your baby. It was quite the thing. My grandmother had beautiful black ebony hair, alabaster skin. She was gorgeous. Her hair was in ringlets. And so, of course, they wanted to pamper her. And on her third birthday, they brought her a silver napkin ring, which I had. And of course, I've dropped it now somewhere on the floor. If I find it before we're over, then I'll show it to you again. But she had everything. But the thing was that she didn't live in a time when you could go to the store and buy clothing. So because she was in this particular family of privilege, the dressmaker would come to her home, and they would make her stand on the table or the chair as she got older, and they would measure her, and they would make adjustments so she could have new clothing. Now, you would think because she was getting this new clothing that she was a happy little girl about that, but she was not. She did not like dresses. She wanted to wear clothing like her brother Tom. And so she was really, gave a lot of pushback. She wiggled a lot, and they had to talk to her about that. And, you know, she'd get stuck by the pin if she did not wiggle too much. So when she got a tiny bit older, she would climb trees. And one of the fun things that she liked to told me about in her later years, that she would climb the tree. And when the milkman with the little cart and the pony, when the milkman was in the home delivering the milk, she was up in the tree throwing rocks at the pony, trying to get the pony to go. Luckily, the pony was very well trained. But of course, my grandmother, Eleanor, got in much trouble for that. Well, it's also a time where in 1906, she was just 5 years old, and the San Francisco fires broke out from the San Francisco earthquake that were across the bay. And she remembers the smell of the smoke as it drifted across from those gas lines that were burning. She remembered seeing the glow of the fires, and it was quite a sensational thing. And she remembered that very vividly, even though she was only 5 years old. Well, like I was telling you about the dresses, in that day, little girls did not wear pants. They did not wear shorts. And so if she wanted to go swimming, she had to swim in a dress. If she wanted to go play onto the tennis courts, she had to wear a dress. If she wanted to play golf, she had to wear a dress. And she was very much against that, but that's what the times dictated. Well, when she was 18 years old, she went to college. University of Southern California in Berkeley. Always was very proud of that. I looked it up on the internet, and it's only 5 miles from where she grew up, but she still went to live on the campus, and she pledged in a sorority, and that was a very big part of her life. She graduated from college. So in 1922, she's graduated from USC at Berkeley, and she's gone to work at a sporting goods store. because she really loved sports. Now, couldn't get a degree in that in those days. She just sort of got a general study degree, but she got at Spalding's, she got a job. So she's there the first week and she's learning how to do everything. And she's a beautiful young woman, trim, slim, beautiful black hair. Like I said, the alabaster skin, the dark brown eyes. And this tall gentleman comes in, and he's tall, he has blonde hair, he's piercing blue eyes. And he comes up to her counter and he says to her, would you sell me some, do you have some golf balls? I'd like to buy some golf balls. She goes, this is a sporting goods store. Of course we have golf balls. And so she showed him the varieties they had. And he said, would you go out with me? What? No, I won't go out with you. The next week he came in. He was now looking for tennis balls. And so he said, do you also sell tennis balls? And she said, yes, we do. And he said, will you go out with me? And she said, absolutely not. We do not go out with the clientele. And so he bought some tennis balls and he left. The next week he came in and he said, I think I would like to buy a new set of golf clubs. Do you sell golf clubs? She said, do you see them over there? Do you see them? Yes. He said, would you go out with me? And she said, I absolutely will not. But before she got the not out, he said, I want you to know that I just purchased a plane. She goes, what? This is 1922. He says, yes, out in the airfield. And he said, I'd like to take you up for a ride if you'd like. You really have an airplane? He goes, yes, I do. Yes. When is your next day off? Saturday. I'll pick you up. So he came in his cool car and they drove out to the airfield and they got on the airstrip, and there was a silver airplane, there was a yellow airplane, and there was a red airplane with biplanes, bi-wings. And she said, oh, I love the red one. And he said, that's good because that's my plane. And she started saying, can I drive it? Can I drive it? Can I drive it? And he said, we don't drive a plane. He said, I've had many lessons. I will fly the plane. You're going to sit in the front. I'm going to sit in the back. And they didn't have covers, and she had a dress on, but, she climbed up and got in the front and he's in the back, and off they went. After about 10 minutes, she's begging, please let me drive. Please let me fly. Please, please. And he says, all right. He says, what you do is you take the stick and very gently pull backwards. What the? Wait. No, push back a little bit. Push to the forward. Wait. Let me grab it. He grabbed back the controls. Her heart was racing. She was just over the moon. And he flew for about another 30 minutes. And when he landed and she climbed out and he started to sing to her, Daisy, Daisy, tell me your answer true. I'm half crazy, all for the love of you. It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but I've got a plane. But you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two. She said yes. And a year later, she got married October 27th, 1923. And remember all those dresses that she had to wear? Well, this dress, I have a picture of her in this dress in 1923. And she had she was cascading. The train was cascading downstairs outside in a garden. And it was at least 30 feet long. And I never heard her complain about that dress. And that, my friends, is the tale of my grandmother.
Bravo. Oh, so fortunate to have that story. What a grandmother, the grandmother we all want to have. Wow. You
She was
must,
the inventor.
yeah, I
I don't know
sure
what
hope your whole family knows about that.
oh yeah, she did. She made this Afghan 50 years ago. She had a lot of, she was very much a woman of detail. So she did beautiful handwork. Thank you for letting me tell.
Oh, thank you. You gave us so much. Oh, my goodness. And that airplane, I heard that same airplane at the air show, by the way.
Oh,
You are very good with sounds, also, young lady.
well, thank you.
That
Maybe
was,
next month I'll find the napkin ring and show it to you because I've
oh,
lost
can't
it.
wait. So see, it looks like Elizabeth's going to be back. We want everyone to come back because these are precious stories. And
Thank you.
honestly, Elizabeth, you look amazing. Love
Thank
that
you.
outfit. And of course, I
Thank
think
you.
we're all going to go out and try to buy those hats now. So thank you.
You're
All
welcome.
right, just to kind of give you all an idea of who's going to be up next, Mark Babino is going to be next, and then Beth, and then Larry. We'll have more tellers after that. Just wanted to give you the lineup. I'm also going to go ahead and put in our chat the links I had sent in earlier, just if you're interested on how you can visit our YouTube channel again and watch this video, or at least share it with your family and friends and let them see these and hear these fabulous stories that have been told so far. So with that said, Mark Babino is also a very dear old friend who looks very, very young. Mark is also on our SASA storytelling board and certainly is a teller for all ears. He's been telling all over the state of Texas, and his tales range in genres from scary, scary tales to fun, hilarious family stories. Don't know what he's going to tell tonight, but I promise you, you'll remember every word. How about a hand for Mark Babino? Mark, yep, unmute, unmute.
Am I there?
You're
Can you hear
there.
me?
You're
Okay.
there.
Well, this is a story I'm kind of working on, so it's rough. But I just changed how I'm going to start. See this little cup? My mother gave me this, well, when I was in the 5th grade, my mom showed me this cup and she said, this was my daddy's. And when you become a man, I'm going to give it to you. And when you open it up, it's a little ringlet cup. And so I'm going to tell you about my grandfather who served in World War I, and he was in the pioneer unit. So a little over 100 years ago, the Selective Service Act was authorized to draft men into the war. And there was a debate about whether or not Black men should be drafted into the war. It was decided that they would serve, but it became somewhat problematic because how do you have someone go abroad and fight for freedom and liberty and citizenry when they're denied the exact same thing here at home? But they were drafted, and then the question was, would they be segregated or not? And they did segregate them. Lieutenants on up were generally white. And one way to identify the race of someone was, and I actually saw this online, they would tear the corner off at the end of their draft registration, indicating that they were Black. I actually saw my grandfather's draft record years ago, and I often wondered why both ends were cut off. Well, the War Department wanted to make sure that once the men were drafted, it was important to the French that they would continually reinforce American policies. Basically, they wanted to make sure that Jim Crow was enforced overseas as it was here, for they did not want them coming back thinking that they did have liberty and they did have rights. So the French were given do's and don'ts of what they should do. They should not salute them. They should not shake their hands excessively, giving praise to in front of someone who was white. That they should make sure that they did not cavort with people in the towns. Now, the pioneers, they were given rifles because they did have basic military training. They were also given picks and axes and shovels because their primary role was for labor, and the majority of the Blacks that served, about 275,000 were sent overseas, and their main role was to keep the communication lines going to and fro. So did they participate in combat? No, but they were only 1 kilometer from the front line. They followed the front line. So they were exposed to German artillery, to bombs. They were shot at, and they were also shot by and killed by friendly fire as well. Their duties were to repair the roads, dig trenches, again, keeping the lines of communication open, rebuilding hospitals, rebuilding headquarters, stables, veterinarian clinics. And once France went into Germany, there was no way for them to come back because the roads had to be clean. So they removed millions of miles of barbed wire. They had to return the French land back to an agricultural land because they were an agriculture people. So the fields had to be cleared of their of the shells of bodies. They were also they also had the duty of reburying the dead. So when my mother gave me this little cup, I just knew my grandfather served in the military. I didn't actually know what he endured and what he went through. He was a part of the Pioneer Unit 801, and there have been reports in my research that they did not participate in combat, but there are 3 cases undocumented that there was a unit that participated, and this unit happened to be the 801, but there's no documentary proof of that. So the jobs that they did was exhausting, and it was dangerous, and Memorial Day just passed by, and so we honor all that served in the military, and particularly the pioneer units. And we look at today, we have our first Black Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin. So I leave you with that. And here's a picture of my grandfather when he joined at 23. Thank you.
Mark, that was amazing. Can I take a picture real quick of you holding your grandfather?
Oh,
The picture of your
okay.
grandfather? And he was
Let's
23
see.
years old, huh?
Yes, he was 23, and he came back at 24. Most of their manpower was at the end of the war.
Handsome man. And
Like
lots
me.
of hair. Yeah, just like you. But with more hair on his head.
Yes.
Thank you, Mark. Very enlightening and quite poignant for the times then and now. I learned so much. Thank you. Much better than reading from a history book, which is not even in the history book. So thank you. All right, our next teller is Beth Graham. And we welcome Beth. She comes to us because of Jane McDaniel, who taught a storytelling class. And Jane's very impressed with how Beth has told this kind of a twisted folk tale. It's a jack tale. And I am so excited that you are here, Beth. And without further ado, let's bring Beth onto the stage.
Thank you. Thank you. My name is Jenny Giant. You've heard more about my husband, Big Guy Giant, than about me, I'm pretty sure. But actually, I don't want to talk about him as much as I want to set the record straight. You need to know that fiction writers have forever taken license with my story. You need to know how much I loved that little Jackie. First off, Big Guy was ugly. I'm talking troll ugly, with wiry red hair stuck up and a nose that rivaled a Great Dane. He was as clumsy as a drunken donkey. Also, he was cruel, dull, and dumb. Always sing-songing, fee-fi-fo-fum, and had the strangest eating habits you ever heard. How many human children he made me cook for him, I lost count. Disgusting pig, Big Guy was, as he ate their little eyeballs with such relish. At least he killed them, ground their bones, so that I didn't have to deal with that mess. To tell the truth, the only reason I married him was that hen that laid the beautiful eggs. Big Guy's own mother promised it to me as a wedding present. I was so taken with it, as well as the musical harp that came along with the chicken, that I let my personal greed get the better of me. Believe me, I've lived to regret this character flaw. I used to enjoy watching Jackie and his mom as I watered flowers on our veranda. Their tiny house was directly below our castle in the clouds, and I was entertained by their scurrying around, hanging clothes across bushes, feeding that skinny old cow, all looking like ants on the ground. Then one day, Jackie led the cow off down the road. I went to the edge of the veranda and kept my eye on him until he disappeared into the woods. I didn't see him for a while, and I missed him. Sometime later, I was shocked when I woke to see a vine growing through my living room window. Suddenly, I heard Big Guy shouting, "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell the blood of an Englishman." Uh-oh. Would poor Jackie soon be the next child I'd have to roast, and from whose bones I would have to make bread? I rushed into the pantry and barely took a breath. I heard pitter-patter, followed by Big Guy's pounding footsteps. As soon as Jackie rounded the corner, I grabbed him, set him on the dumbwaiter, and closed the door. I let him all the way down into the basement, stepped out of the pantry, and greeted Big Guy. "Hi, honey," I asked. "Are you hunting for something?" Big Guy grumbled about the tree in the living room and a human kid racing around his den. "Don't worry, I'll take care of that child." I didn't exactly lie. He stalked off. "Fee, fi, fo. Damn, I lost the scent," he growled. Calmly, I went to the hen, gathered her up, then picked up the harp, tossed them both into a tow sack, and headed back to the pantry. I hadn't gone 3 steps till that harp began to sing my mother-in-law's favorite song at the top of her stringy lungs. "Oh Lord, won't you buy me a Mercedes-Benz? My friends all drive Porsches. I must make amends." You can imagine how scared I was then that Big Guy would eat me. But he was rumbling up the stairs toward the attic. "Fee, fi, fo, fum. I smell." I whispered down the well of the dumbwaiter, "Jackie, just hang on." I pulled the board up, put the hen and the singing harp on it. I Sent it down to the hollow space. Run, Jackie, run, I called out. Big guy heard the harp singing, oh Lord, won't you buy me a color TV? As Jackie climbed down the vine, big guy bolted as best he could bolt out the front door. The whole castle shook as he descended the vine. From this veranda, I could see Jackie reach the ground and his mom rushed to greet him. She took the hand and the harp and pointed to the axe. Wow, what a shock. Jackie was hacking away at the trunk of the vine. Big guy was hanging on, dangling from a branch, blossom tickling his nose. Before Jackie could finish chopping, big guy's branch broke and he dropped at Jackie's feet. Thud. I could hear big guys moaning in death throes all the way up to the veranda. Did I feel sad? No, not at all. I was just glad I wasn't the one who had to bury that ginormous body. And I was very thankful to Jackie that he saved me from a dreadful divorce. Fairly often, Jackie and his wife and their 5 little children climb up for a visit on my veranda where we can enjoy the bougainvillea Jackie put in for me. I make them sourdough bread and they bring fresh butter from their herd of dairy cows. The kids hug me about my knees and call me Big Mama. You need to know, I've lived happily ever after.
That was so funny. Well written. Good girl. Thank you so much. Okay, I think you got a future in storytelling, young lady.
Thank you very much.
You continue on with those twisted tales of yours. We loved them. And I'm so glad you lived happily ever after.
She deserved it.
All right. I'm going to mix things up a little bit. I know I had an order, but I just realized I have all of Jane's folks right towards the end. So I'm going to ask Nathan Holiner if he wouldn't mind coming on board real quick, and then we'll go to Larry Johnson. So Nathan, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Okay.
Okay. I'm pretty sure many of you have heard this story before, but it was inspired by 2 old childhood friends of mine. It goes something like this. You see, once there were 2 brothers named Trevor and Cameron, and they were farmers who lived on a very small farm with a few cows and horses. It was a lovely little ranch, and you might think the 2 brothers would be happy, but instead they were sad and complained all the time. It's not fair, said Trevor. I want a bigger ranch with lots of space to ride my horses on and for my cows to graze in. It's not fair, said Cameron. I'm tired of this lousy farm. I want to live in a palace. It's not fair, they said. We both want better food and with lots of food to last a lifetime. You see, they were tired of seeing the same old stew every day. And that's just the way things were. One day, the 2 brothers went for a walk in the woods to take their minds off of the troubles they had, and then until they came across an old well, all covered with vines that hadn't been used in several years. Trevor and Cameron cleared away the vines, and then, to their astonishment, the well spoke to them. Thank you, gentlemen, for clearing away those vines. I am the great magic wishing well. And to say thank you, I heard of your troubles, and I know you're not happy. And so to give my thanks, I will give each of you 3 wishes. The first wish was for Trevor to make, the second wish was for Cameron to make, and the third wish was for the both of them to make together. When Trevor and Cameron heard that, they became excited and they went running back home, and they immediately began discussing about what they wanted to wish for. Trevor wanted a bigger ranch with plenty of space for his horses and cows, but Cameron wanted to live in a palace. And so they talked and argued until Trevor began to get hungry. And then, without even thinking, Trevor said, "Gee, I'm so hungry. I wish I had a great big cheeseburger with French fries and a milkshake." And sure enough, a great big tasty cheeseburger appeared right before them with a side of French fries and a milkshake. But Cameron was outraged. "You fool," he shouted. "You just wasted your wish. I wish that cheeseburger were stuck to your head." And sure enough, the cheeseburger disappeared and reappeared right on the top of Trevor's head. Trevor pushed and pulled with all his might, but the cheeseburger would not budge. He tried to scrape it off with a spatula. He tried to cut it off with a knife, and he even tried to saw it off, but it was no use. And so they both wasted a wish. And then they only had one wish left, and that wish was the wish that the both of them had to make together. "We must wish for a bigger ranch and a palace," said Cameron. "No way," said Trevor. "I'm not going to spend the rest of my life with a cheeseburger stuck to my head." And Trevor refused to think of any other wish except the wish that would make the cheeseburger come off his head. And so, unable to agree, they walked back to the wishing well. "Well, gentlemen," said the well, I see that you are still not happy." "Oh, we are not. Oh, yes, we're not. We are unhappy," said Cameron. We wished for a larger ranch and for a palace, but Trevor wished for a cheeseburger instead. And now I wish that the cheeseburger would get stuck to his head. And now I can't get the cheeseburger off my head," said Trevor. "And we both have one wish left," said Cameron, "and we want to use it for a bigger ranch and a palace." "But what about me?" said Trevor. I want the cheeseburger to come off my head." "Well, gentlemen," said the well, "are you ready to make your final wish?" "Yes," said Trevor immediately. "I wish that this cheeseburger would come off my head." Eventually, even Cameron gave in. "Yes," he sighed reluctantly, "we wish that the cheeseburger would come off Trevor's head." And sure enough, the cheeseburger lifted off from Trevor's head and disappeared into thin air. "Well, I hope you boys have all learned your lesson," said the well. "I hope that from now on, you will be careful for what you wish for, and that you should be thankful for what you have." Cameron looked at Trevor and then said, "You know, Trevor, we don't need a bigger ranch or a palace." "Yes," Trevor agreed. "We are happy and thankful with what we have." And the two brothers never complained again. The end.
Good job, Nathan. Although I can't imagine two brothers never complaining again. But you know, it reminded me of Jimmy Buffett's Cheeseburger in Paradise. You retold that tale so well. Thank you so much. Good job.
Thank you. Thank you so much. It was my pleasure.
All right. Well, now without further ado, we're going to move on to Larry Johnson. And Larry told a splendid tale last month and was invited back again. I hope you all come back each month. And then after Larry, we'll have Laurie Hale, this is just turning out to be such a wonderful night. So Larry Johnson, come on the stage.
Thank you very much. And I am going to change pace today. I'm going to read a short story from my first book, which is called Mexico by Touch. And I wrote it about my life in Mexico. I loved to play football with my son, Danny, when he was little. I would design the plays, and then together we would execute them against imaginary opponents. One afternoon, we were scheming and scrimmaging on a nice tree-shaded grassy lawn about a block from our apartment. Danny was maybe 6 at the time. I just completed diagramming a very deceptive end-around play. Danny hiked the football to me. I faked going forward ahead and then cut swiftly to my right and turned the corner, a blinding flash of speed, and crashed headlong into an oak tree. I fell to the ground, stunned and bleeding. Danny ran up to me, scared, wanting to know if he should go back home for help. I told him, no, just help me get back to my feet. Slowly and a bit unsteadily, we made our way back home. I knew I had seriously gashed my forehead. I could feel the blood running like tears down my face. I took out my handkerchief and held it over the wound. On reaching the apartment, we were met there by Lucy, our maid, who squealed with fear and concern. I knew that my wife, Deanna, was out shopping with our daughter, Luana. I went straight to the bathroom, instructing Lucy to bring me ice and then to call the Cruz Roja, the emergency ambulance service in Mexico City. In less than 10 minutes, they were there. 2 young attendants came rushing up the stairs carrying a portable stretcher. I can walk, I told them in Spanish. I removed the ice from the wound to let them take a look. By now, the bleeding had all but stopped. The ice had done its job. One of the attendants inspected the 1.5-inch long gash above my left eye. It looks rather ugly, he said. You're going to need stitches. I nodded. I had already examined the wound with my fingers, and I knew that simple home first aid was not going to be sufficient. I told Danny to tell his mother and sister when they came home that Daddy had had a little accident and had gone to the Cruz Roja to get his head fixed up. And I asked Lucy to stay by the phone in case my wife called. I left with the 2 assistants. They opened up the rear of the ambulance and directed me to climb in. There were 2 long, hard wooden benches, one on either side. I got in and sat down. After closing the door behind me, the 2 attendants climbed into the front seat, leaving me to suffer alone with my throbbing head. And then we began our wild ride. You would have thought it was a matter of life or death, the way they zigzagged back and forth through traffic, siren going full blast. The repeated acceleration and braking by the driver sent me sliding back and forth along the wooden bench, while his sharp turns around corners all but dumped me onto the floor. The ride, mercifully, was a short one. On arriving, I was shown into a large examining room. There were perhaps 8 or 10 examining tables, all quite plain and very much alike. I was told to climb onto one of them and wait my turn. After a few minutes, a young woman, a nurse, I suppose, came by and asked me my name and address and the name of my next of kin. After snapping an ID bracelet on my wrist, she disappeared. In the distance, I could hear the moans and groans of fellow sufferers, but somehow I felt small concern for their misery. I could only think, when will they get around to me? At last, after what seemed like an eternity, but probably was more like 15 minutes, a doctor came by with 2 assistants. What happened to you? He asked in Spanish. I was playing football with my son and I ran into a tree. Oh, you should be more careful. Football can be a dangerous sport. I mumbled my agreement. And why were we wasting time discussing the relative hazards of playing football when I am lying here in pain and needing someone to do something about it? We're going to have to sew this up, he was saying, as much to me as to his 2 assistants. Well, finally, they're going to get down to business. I felt a gauze mask being placed over my face. The part over my left eye was folded down to expose my wound, which by now was beginning to bleed once more. I felt the sting of alcohol as it was swabbed over the open cut. I tried closing my eye as the alcohol, now mixed with blood, came trickling down under the gauze mask. The effort drew a sharp rebuke from the doctor. "Don't tighten your eyes or your muscle. It will make it harder to put in the sutures." I was in no condition to argue. Besides, any muscle movement I made on that side of my face caused the pain to worsen. Vaguely, I heard the doctor giving instructions to one of his assistants about how and where to put in the stitches. And then suddenly I felt a needle piercing my skin. Thank heaven, I thought. They're finally taking compassion on me and administering a local anesthetic. Soon this throbbing will subside. Oh God, let it take effect quickly. Just then I felt another sharp stab of the needle. My Lord, what is this? It couldn't be that they're actually suturing, putting in the stitches without, ouch! There was another sharp jab. They were, indeed, sewing my head back together without so much as offering me an aspirin. The doctor and one of the assistants moved away, leaving the other fellow to finish the job. Ouch! There goes number 4, or was it 5? How many was it going to take? I tried thinking of something else, a plate of delicious tacos and a cold beer, but each new stab of the needle brought me painfully back to reality. I resigned myself, knowing that soon it had to be over. Although there was a slight chill in the room, I felt beads of perspiration on my forehead, and my breathing came heavy under the gauze mask. I longed for the cool taste of fresh air. I reached for the mask and started to raise it. "No, don't do that. Remain still, please," ordered the young assistant. And then, as if to drive home his request, he inserted the needle once more. There were 6 pointed thrusts at my throbbing head, 11 in all, I think. And then mercifully, it was over. I had survived. I waited. The young intern left. In a few minutes, he was back with the doctor, who inspected the workmanship of his assistant. You're going to have to do those last 4 over again, Enrique. Too far apart, and add 1 more for good measure. Was I hearing right? Am I going to have to go through this all over again? This is too much. Why don't I just get up off this table and walk out of here? Sure, I can see myself flagging down a cab and saying to the driver, "I need a few stitches in my head. Take me to some other doctor. The guys here at the Cruz Roja are barbarians." Snip, snip. It was too late. He had already cut the improperly placed sutures and was deftly removing the evidence. I realized then that I must be a masochist. I lay there patiently and suffered through the restitching of my wound. Perhaps I thought St. Peter is watching and will credit this to my account. The head doctor came over to take one last look. He pronounced me ready to leave. I all but jumped off the table. I was so happy. Diana had been waiting for me over half an hour, understandably quite worried. She said that they had not allowed her to come into the examining room to see me. She asked how I felt and how they had treated me. "Oh, I'm fine now," I said, "but I think I'm going to have to give up football on doctor's advice."
Crazy. Oh my goodness. Your writing is superb. Now that next step for you guys is just telling it out of your thoughts and memories of those stories, and you've got it down. Wow, that was amazing. Thank you so much, Larry. Our last teller is actually it's actually lovely to have her here. She's actually the wife of our John Hale, Laurie Hale, and we don't get to see her very often. So I was excited to find out that she has a story to tell. And with that said, let's bring Laurie Hale to the stage. Come on aboard, Laurie.
Thank you, Sue.
You're welcome.
Now, this story, it's not exactly polished. I've been working on it for a little while, so we'll see where it goes. I have a friend who lives in the hill country. She loves to get the ladies together every now and then. And my schedule is just so busy.
Laurie, you're muted.
I thought I pressed the button. Ha, that's okay. All right. This story, I've been working on it for a little while. It's not polished, so we'll see where it goes. I have a friend who lives in the hill country. She'd have the ladies together every now and then. Sometimes it would end up being a sleepover, but my schedule was always so busy I could never go. One weekend, lo and behold, I was off and I could go out there to hang out with my girlfriends. So I drove out. I wasn't planning on spending the night, but oh, it was a potluck and we took all of our favorite dishes. You know what happens when you have good food up in the hill country, and then some of us were drinking and we were having a really good time. Well, one of the ladies said, let's watch a movie. What do we want to watch? And I thought, I want to watch the new Jason Bourne movie. Well, I got voted down. They all wanted to watch the Divine Secrets of the Yaya Sisterhood. So I sat through that and I thought, well, this is being with the girls. This is fun. And I had drank and I wasn't going to drive home. Plus, John snores. I thought this is a chance for me to have one night where I can get a decent night's sleep, I thought. I sat there in an ottoman or a chair with my feet on the ottoman, and I fell asleep. I woke up the next morning with a stiff neck, but oh, it was so fun to be there with the girls. We spent the whole day trying to solve all the world's problems. And I thought, I don't want to go home. I want to stay here. Well, Susie, our host, she said, well, Laurie, you can stay here. You'll just have to share the bedroom with Janet. And I thought, yeah, Janet snores too. Well, I guess I'll try it. A storm was coming. We live here in Central Texas. We know what that means. The thunder and lightning was coming. And I thought, I will not make it back to San Antonio in time. This was in Bernie. I'm going to stay here and I'll see how Janet is. So I go to get in the bed with Janet. She's got her back to me and I've got my back to her. I thought, okay, it's nice and quiet. Oh, I go to sleep. 45 minutes later, it's Janet. I thought, oh, I'll go back in the living room and sleep in that chair I was in last night. Gladys was out there on the couch. Gladys snores too. And I thought, okay, Janet, Gladys, and then Susie, our host, in her room. Goodness, it was a symphony of the cowgirls obnoxiously producing deafness. Okay, I had this feeling if I left right now, I'd beat that storm. I got in my car and I hightailed it, and in the windshield there were raindrops, but I made it. I made it all the way back to San Antonio just after midnight, and there was John laying in the bed. Well, now it didn't seem so bad, just one snoring. And the moral of my story is, like what Nathan said in his story, be grateful for what you have. Be grateful for what you have at home. It's great to spend time with friends, but sometimes you just got to go home and face the music there. And that's the end.
Bravo. Oh my gosh, I was laughing so hard. We have that snoring going on in our house too, with 2 dogs and a husband. Oh, that was so funny. That was a perfect way to sadly end our SASA story night for June. We'd like to invite each and every one of you and your friends and family and other folks that you might know who will love stories to come on back in July, the very first Wednesday in July. We'll be advertising on all those links I gave you. If you would like, you can either take a picture of the links I sent, but if you're in the chat, if you're in your chat box, you can also, what do you call it? Go to more and, whoops, let me find my chat box. Okay, I've lost my chat box. It's just disappeared. But you can actually save your chat box and put it onto your desktop, and you'll find all the links there. But just look for us on Facebook, San Antonio Storytellers. And I'd like to thank each and every one of you. We had 19 folks here tonight, and I know we are live on YouTube. And you'll be able to send that out to other folks so that they can join our channel so that you won't miss a link again. So we'd love to have you.